Welcome everyone. It's very good to see you. It's very good to see in this space a number of children, our future. And I'm really honored. I am Yemi Daniet from the World Resource Institute. I am a director of climate negotiations, and I'm very honored and pleased to be welcomed in this panel with distinguished colleagues. First I'm going to have I'm going to moderate a session in this COP, which is about keeping 1.5 alive. We need to see an acceleration path. We need to also be resilient to it. And we need to do that with solidarity and transparency and accountability. And all of you, all of us need to play a part for that. And I am very happy to have the representative and get the insight from Scotland, our host country here, from Canada, from Lithuania, and hopefully from Finland, in a moment. So I'm not going to talk too much because we would like this to be very dynamic. And I would like to spend more time to hear your views. And I'm going to start with our Scottish Minister, Mr. Patrick Harvey. And you have hosted Citizens Assembly. What does it mean, for those hearing us, for this COP? How important it is, for keeping open government open, and how does it contribute to keeping 1.5 alive, to keeping ourselves resilient to this world? Tell me what you think.
Well, thank you very much for the introductions, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you for a few minutes. First of all, can I welcome those of you who are visitors here. You're not only in Scotland, and I'm here on behalf of the Scottish Government, I'm also a Glasgow member of the Scottish Parliament, so you're very, very warmly welcome to Glasgow, and I hope that you have a very productive and enlightening time here.
Hello.
Fundamentally, the question is about power, is about how decisions are made, where power lies, how do people relate to power? And that can be a difficult question. When I was the age of our young delegates here, Scotland didn't have its own parliament, and we had a very, very centralised way of making decisions about how Scotland would develop, about how our economy would be run. And there was a big campaign to create a Scottish parliament, but we didn't just want to create a replica of what happens in London inside a building in Edinburgh. And a big part of the ethos, the idea of the campaign for devolution was a parliament that would share power with the people. That was a big slogan of the campaign to create a Scottish parliament: share power with the people. Don't just keep it all locked up inside a room where the politicians and the policy experts are gathered. It needs to be out there. It needs to be in every community. Now, I'm not going to pretend that we've always done that perfectly, and you can always continue to learn how you're doing it well, where you do it badly, and how you can get better at it. In the early years of the Parliament, there was a civic forum, and it wasn't brilliant, but it was getting better. But instead of helping it to get better, it was abolished. Well, since then, we've been really trying to innovate, trying to create new ways of engaging people with the questions of how power operates. Citizens' assemblies are just one model for doing that. They're a really important one, and they can help to cut through the party politics. When you have a controversial decision being made in party politics, very often it just comes down to, very shallow issues about who's on which side, who plays for which team. But a citizens' assembly, or other ways of having deliberative, participative engagement with citizens able to take part in decision-making processes directly, it cuts through party politics, and it can bring in fresh perspectives from people who often have barriers to accessing formal decision-making processes, people who are often further away from economic power, further away from political power. They have their voices heard. Now, as I say, there are a range of ways of doing that at a local level with participatory budgeting, giving local communities the ability to make choices about some of their public spending, right through to the citizens' assemblies models and organizations like the Children's Parliament, which again innovate and create new ways to bring those fresh voices in. One of the models we used was on climate, was particularly called the Climate Challenge Fund. We were very, very aware that climate policy, very often it feels to people like an abstract technical issue, CO2 parts per million and marginal abatement cost curves and all of the difficult, complex, really challenging issues that are being debated here, whether they're being debated well or badly. It can be a very exclusive process. So we wanted the Climate Challenge Fund that would just allow people to try their own thing, allow a local community to say, we think growing more of our local food is the answer. We think working together to insulate our homes is the answer. We think changing the way we move about is the answer. And whether they were right or wrong, they felt more powerful because they'd been given a little bit of support to try their own ideas and to figure out for themselves what works and what doesn't. And then most recently we had not just a Citizens' Assembly on Scotland, but a Climate Citizens' Assembly as well that was created in the most recent Climate Act. And again, the opportunity to start cutting through some issues which can easily become polarized in the political sphere. Who's going to get a bit of transport infrastructure built for them? Who's going to be paying for some of the changes that we need to make to our energy system? Citizens' assemblies and the other deliberative processes can cut through that and actually bring a richer debate because it brings new perspectives into the discussion. And the government, the Scottish Government's ongoing commitment to work through the Open Government Partnership, I think, is a continued sign that we see more and more opportunities in the future to have this ethos, to have this open, participative, deliberative approach to sharing power with the people. And we still won't always get it right. We'll still need to keep on challenging ourselves and learning to do it better. But just today, for example, we're announcing that one of the recommendations from the Climate Assembly on banning single-use plastics, we're going to be taking action to implement that. Another of my colleagues, Lorna Slater, is making the announcement on that almost as I speak at the Panda Pavilion. So we're really committed not just to listening, but to ensuring that the voices that are heard are having an impact and allowing us to share power effectively across Scotland. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion about how that same ethos is being shared in other places around the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm really glad to welcome, Mr. Krista Mikkonen. Good. That's great. And Finland has also a different way to bring public participation. And you're particularly known for the gender, for your gender lens into this. We heard a lot about just transition, how to make it meaningful for every people. How your lens on gender, how your experience in designing those kind of public participation is. Tell us about it.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And yes, well, in Finland, for us, it's very important that our society is open. And openness is one of our core values. And openness is not just access to information, it's more participation, it's open and transparent communication about government as an enabler of civil society. So it's very important that people can participate and be a part of the society and be active, and also that we encourage the civil society to take part of also like official things like when we are preparing the legislation. And when our government started, in our government program, we have made 6 pledges to Finnish people. And I would like to draw your attention to 2 of them. One is the pledge for fair and equal treatment across generations and genders. And the other is a pledge for a new kind of interaction. So we want to take our people along us when we are doing the legislation and different other kind of things what we need to do. For example, for climate policy, because now it's very important. We can't have a good results if we can't take people with us. And of course, the just transition is part of that as well. So the open, so this is a very important elements of our climate policy. And for example, now when we are renewing our Finnish Climate Act, we have followed the open government principles. And in fact, our work on drafting the new act is considered one of the best practices of open government in Finland. And what does it mean? Well, first of all, we really put a lot of emphasis on accessibility. Not only the physical accessibility, but also for that. So Finland is a very large country with few people, so we had this kind of open discussions about our new climate law in different places in Finland. So it's easy people to come and discuss about the proposal. And actually we have those meetings mostly in libraries, because the libraries are places where it's easy to go. And I think we had 6 or 7 different sessions around Finland, and there was a lot of people, and especially young people, because we wanted to, when we are doing our climate law, we wanted to concentrate especially to the most vulnerable groups, like young people and the Sami people. And then if you look at the physical, in the physical sense of the accessibility, we also providing easy language version, so it's everything easier to understand, because we know this normal text for legislation can be quite complicated. And then we had this text on relevant web pages. In addition to this open, like a round tour around Finland, we also have 2 very large open web hearings, and the questions were tested by a group of young people beforehand. So we wanted to make sure that on those hearings, people really understand what we are saying, and the language is that kind of that it's easy to join in, and you don't feel stupid if you don't understand, and so in that way you are afraid to say anything, because you don't know that is a good question or is it a stupid question. So we tried really ensure that the language is understandable, and also we. You could answer in many languages, and because the Sami people was one of our main, we wanted to concentrate the Sami people, especially you could answer in 3 different Sami languages. So all the Sami groups were able to answer their own mother tongue. And then you were able to answer in English and Swedish. And then the young people also we worked a lot with young Sami people. So we wanted to hear the voice of the young Sami people as well, and so we have round tables and dialogue meetings with the Sami people, and especially with the young Sami people. And then we used also social media. Instagram questionnaire and digital panel, among others. So that's the way we wanted to make sure that young people in general find these questionnaire as well, and take an answer and tell what they are thinking about the climate law. Well, of course, when you want to participate people, it's very hard to please everyone, and there's always things that you can do better. And I think we still have room for improvement. But as a country with openness as a core value, we should show international leadership together with like-minded countries on how we plan climate policies in participatory and inclusive ways. And we also have this kind of citizens panel, and we use that for the climate policy because, like I said, the climate questions, they are very linked to your everyday life. So it's very important to get to know what people are thinking and what kind of measures are those which are more accessible for the people. So it's very important that we don't listen to only those which are the loudest one, but we try to have this kind of methods that we can really hear the voice of everyone. And this kind of citizens panels is very good way for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's maybe some concrete examples what I've been doing, we have been doing.
Indeed, concrete example, showing how important the communication is, to support open access, to these debates. So citizen assembly debates. Lithuania is known for, having opened up a public procurement data, the dimension of procurement that has so many ramifications in what we're trying to do. It's going to be interesting for you to tell us, Minister Gintare Krishniane.
Very good.
Yes, there we go.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your invitation to this important discussion. I would like to start a bit further up front, further away. Being here at COP, at the major climate negotiations, I think it's crucial to state how important citizen engagement is to really find effective climate solutions and to reach the targets that we talk so much about in this conference. Because as a matter of fact, actual emission reductions, they are made by decisions of people, of households, and of businesses. So it is crucial that the targets are being cascaded down to the actual decisions, and actually that the most effective solutions come bottom-up approach to the strategies and to the priorities in financing, in regulation, and in other things. So it's a very valuable discussion that we are doing here to make those connections. And yes, the government of Lithuania, and Lithuania as a country, first, what we need to say, it's a young democracy. We are only 30 years old, so actually younger than myself, our democracy is. So we are in a learning pathway in the governance process, and we are 10 years member of Open Government Global Initiative, so we are making plans, actually 5th of them already, how to better involve the public. And my government that I am a member of started working only a year ago, and in the first half of year we renewed our open government plan to really make a focus on open data, and green purchases is really a key part of that, so I will come back to that. Also, what our government did is made a big promise to really work on climate, exactly, to strengthen participatory democracy. So we actually this summer approved, renewed our national climate strategy. We committed to reduce our greenhouse gases 70% compared to 1990. Currently, we stand something about at -58. That's because of the Soviet Union collapse. But this reduction is a big challenge. And what we really want to do as this new government is to launch 5 sectorial decarbonization groups. So that is for energy, for transport, for agriculture, for industry, for waste, separate stakeholder groups, where representatives from business and also from civil society, NGOs, will engage in discussions as to what are the best solutions not like globally, but actually locally for Lithuania to really reach those targets. So this participatory process that we are launching actually with climate is, I would say, one of the most advanced co-creation processes that has evolved in the government of Lithuania to really employ that bottom-up approach. And then another way to really strive towards climate targets is vote with the money. So this is what our government is also ready to do. So we have ambitious plans to have 100% green public procurement by 2023. So it's in 2 years, and currently we stand at something like 10%. So this is really steep. And how we are about to do it. So one is more like a labeling and criteria thing that Ministry of Environment has really engaged a lot and provided guidance and methodology to really look into what is a green procurement. But the other and very powerful thing is this open data approach that we are doing together with, just to put it right, open contract partnership. So this is an international partnership, and they're helping us to launch an electronic platform for green public procurement, so that we can really transparently display which organizations buy what, in what amounts of money, and on what criteria. And that is a mean of accountability. Mm-hmm. That is also a mean of best practice sharing. And we are going to analyze not only, good-looking statistics, but also the cost implications to really fight the myth: is green procurement really that much more expensive, or is it useful? So government is ready to vote with its own purse, and that's big money. So I think it's another way of really engaging with the public through transparency that promotes green change. So I think I stop here with these two examples.
Thank you very much. And I think it's good to see so much complementarity, different angle. And I'm going to turn to you, Patricia, Ambassador Fuller. We heard during this conference Canada pushing a lot for human rights and doing a lot with Indigenous people. What does it mean? And we've seen Canada moving its targets to a much more ambitious one. We know that we all have to do more. How did you do this more openly, with more accountability, and bringing the public, into these discussions? And how difficult it was? Let's be honest. It's tough. We heard how tough it was to touch upon, the issue of just transition in particular. So how was it in Canada, and what does it mean?
Thank you, Yumid, and a pleasure to participate in the discussion. With respect to Canada's, as you say, very ambitious commitment, our new NDC of 40 to 45% emission reductions that we committed to last spring, I would say it's been a process to get there. And we started with our Pan-Canadian framework on climate change and clean growth in 2015 and 2016, and that was a very extensive process of work among the federal and provincial and territorial governments and Indigenous peoples. We have national Indigenous organizations, 3 national Indigenous organizations in Canada that were a part of that process, and a whole set of working groups that developed the Pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change. Then, as part of this Paris process of accelerating ambition, we have come forward with additional plans over the past few years, with consultations with partners along the way. And in our most recent development of our new NDC. We had a consultation process last March and April online, and as part of the structure we've set up with the Pan-Canadian Framework, we have tables where we meet regularly with the National Indigenous organizations, as well as, of course, with provinces and territories. But I did want to just speak also about our commitment to open government more broadly and just place climate change a bit in the context of our participation in the open government partnership. This is a partnership that Canada's been a member of for 10 years as well, like Lithuania. So we are also on our 5th open government plan, and these are plans which are co-created with civil society. That's the sort of the essence of the open government process, that these plans for open government, for progressing on open government, are prepared through a co-creation process. So in this 5th one that we're working on right now, certainly not surprisingly, climate change has come forward as an area of key concern. There's 4 areas, but climate change is one of them. And that's not surprising, because the principles of open government, which are 3 of them: transparency, public participation, and accountability. We can't think of an issue where that is more important than climate change and where we are at on climate change. So based on what we heard in this co-creation process, we're now consulting the commitment with through a Let's Talk Open Government online process. But this draft commitment that we're developing around open government and climate change does have a very strong focus on data, because that is what we heard. And the minister from Scotland referenced earlier that this is to some extent around power. Well, information is power, and so what we heard in the consultations with citizens was a desire for better access to climate science, better access to data, making the data more easily discoverable, reducing silos between different types of data. So some of the things that we're working on in response to that are an open science and data platform that we launched in March of 2020 of this year, 2021, that provides access to 140,000 records on cumulative effects of climate change, including, you can imagine the range: geospatial data, publications, and educational content. We also have, through Statistics Canada and the Canadian Centre for Energy Information, data sets available through those portals. And we have a new roadmap for open science, which has a strong linkage, of course, with climate change, and that is delivering yearly reports that measure progress on opening access to federal work on science. So that's the kind of open government process. And then we are doing just 2 other things that I'd like to mention. Through our new net zero legislation, we have a legislative requirement to consult with the public on our evolving net zero targets and milestones for achieving net zero by 2050. And we have a net zero advisory board that also has a mandate to consult publicly. And the last thing I'd like to mention is we are establishing a youth council for the department, which leads on climate change, environment and climate change Canada. So this youth council, we're in the process of selecting the members, and that's so those are members between the ages of 18 and 25, and they will have a direct participation in the policy development process around climate change.
Thank you very much. What strikes me is, how the youth are, putting at the core of this conversation, right? And, this notion of, power dynamic, and accessibility and accountability at the same time. So I think, and just to connect, I cannot resist. We're going to start after Glasgow. We're going to be in a process called this global stocktake, where we need to look at where we are, where we need to be, and how we get there. And all of you have mentioned different climate strategy, climate policies, and how to actually bring really this open government partnership, that really at the core in bringing your leadership there, to really actually not keeping in silo as a separate entity and separate work, but really linking it to what we need to achieve, within the climate space. So I think, those processes that we're still working on, provide that opportunity to showcase also this at the highest level. But let me stop here, because I think we do have a video that we would like to show, and I'm giving the signal to the technical team to do that.
Hello, my name is David. I am a 71-year-old retired Glaswegian.
Hi, I'm Maya, I'm 10 and I live in the Highlands.
Older people grew up thinking that climate emergency was something far off into the future, if we thought of it at all. It's my reality now. We all have a responsibility to tackle it.
I've never known a time when the climate emergency didn't threaten my future. I can't see a world without it. It's something me and my friends are growing up with.
People from all walks of life were brought together as a mini Scotland to agree how the country needs to change to tackle the climate emergency. We examined the best evidence and found common ground on a way forward. Already we are seeing the harmful effects of climate change in Scotland and around the world. Temperature rises, extreme weather, damage to plants and animals under rivers and oceans, threats to our food supply. There is so much waste in how we do things at the moment. That needs to change now. This needs to go much further than just a bit of household recycling. We need immediate action to bring down Scotland's carbon emissions.
It can't just be down to us as individuals. We need everyone to pull together. Government, businesses, and communities across Scotland. We need big changes. Changes to how we work, how we travel, how we build our buildings, how we heat our homes.
We can make big changes right now. Changes to how our public services are run, how we make sure we all understand the climate emergency, how we use our land, how our communities are connected, how our businesses work. We can make a better Scotland by making these changes together.
It's time for Scotland to take the lead in tackling the global climate emergency.
Scotland's Climate Assembly has laid down a mandate from ordinary citizens for immediate action. We can make a difference.
We can make a difference.
Thank you very much for this video. This video is also available in YouTube. It's our story. We can make a difference in Scotland's Climate Assembly, and we may have future videos, if not already there, from Lithuania, Canada, and Finland. And now, in order to kickstart, the interaction with the public, this is what it's all about. I'm going to ask some children to ask you some questions. And I'm going to start with Nadia.
Hello, my name is Nadia and I'm 13 years old. I live in West Lothian, Scotland, and I'm a part of the Children's Parliament. So the Children's Parliament right now are the first children to be involved in a citizens' assembly. And before the Children's Parliament, I didn't really know anything about climate change. So all we learned about was littering. So my question for you is, what do you do in your country to teach children and adults about climate change and what skills they would need to learn?
Any one of you would like to take up the challenge?
Well, if I start, I think it's very important that We have this kind of climate education from the very young childhood, from the kindergarten to the school, primary school, then secondary school, high school, and that's going on. And of course, on every level, you need to have and discuss that kind of way and that kind of things which are important to you at that age. And like you said, that climate policy is much more than just avoiding littering, or it's not just recycling. It's the total change of the system, like you said, saw in the video. But it's not. It's a better life. It's a better tomorrow. And it's important that we involve everybody and start when the people are young. And actually, in many cases, those young people and children at home are the ones who are teaching the adults and parents. So it's also that's why it's so important to involve everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I noticed looking at the wall of letters from children that's out in the hallway that education is a strong demand from youth, that you're seeing that that's very important. And I think in the video as well, where it talks about it's our daily lives, but there's also big changes we need to make which involve complex policies. So it's kind of at all levels of education that we need to have a really strong basis for this change that's necessary. So in Canada, education is a provincial mandate, but certainly the federal government, the national government, has an important role to play in supporting that education process with the kind of accessible information that I was referencing earlier, that educators can then draw on for all levels of education to prepare their curricula, and so these kinds of portals that I was referencing, where people can not only go online but also can reach out to our climate services staff to help them to use these data sets. And so, for example, if you're teaching children about how does what is the outlook for temperature change in their local area, we have in this climate data portal the possibility for people to go and see how is temperature expected to increase in their local area, how is precipitation expected to evolve in their local area. So these types of data and knowledge tools, I think, are the kind of the bedrock for the education system that then the provinces and territories are responsible for managing.
Thank you. What about Lithuania? How do you do this?
I actually, it's an excellent question. I can very second your experience, because myself, I have graduated school and university without knowing about climate change. So my generation didn't receive that message through formal education, and I see how it's much more difficult to convince my counterparts of my generation of the necessity of action. And now on the opposite side, my children who are now in kindergarten, they already know much more than I knew at university, about climate change, and they are asking the right questions about action, about even policy, and what is done for the solution. So it's crucial, and it's being done that from the very early age, climate topic is being integrated upon all levels, from the kindergarten to university. So this is what we do, but I think that's not enough, because we keep on learning more and more about climate change and different solutions that evolve and the challenges they pose. For example, batteries, it's a solution on one way, but a problem on the circular economy still to be solved. So my message is that this is a lifelong learning process. The climate is really about formal and informal education, and grown-ups need to be educated too.
Thank you. And you had a beautiful video. Anything you want to add to this? I know that my child is a police officer, on climate at home. And, during that pandemic, we attended to use Amazon to get delivery services. And he was the one to say, Mom, you need to make sure that, you don't do that maybe once a month. You organize yourself not to get so much delivery because of the pollution. So he's 12 years old, and this is, I was not discussing this like this at, when I was his age. What would you like to add to this young generation?
Well,
here?
I mean, when I was your age, Nadia, my mum was an environmental activist, so I was having to discuss these things and do volunteering and so on, but very, very few people did. Your generation now is showing a very, very clear appetite and urgency on this issue, and I think your generation have a right to be angry with the state of the world that you're inheriting, and a real urgency to step up, for all of us to step up. I think it's actually a little bit higher up the age groups that it becomes difficult, and people, start their lives and they're being bombarded with advertising telling them to consume, buy a car, fly off on holiday. They're also being bombarded with pressures around having to work harder to make ends meet. I used to work in public health, and I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that people don't just need to be told what's the right and wrong thing to do. They need the right circumstances. They need for the good choices to be made easy and convenient, and they need to feel that they've got some power and some ability to make choices. So it's not just that we need people to understand climate and the ecological emergency. We also need to understand each other. The two people in the video, a school pupil from the Highlands and a retired older man from the central belt of Scotland, they might never have understood each other's perspectives. Someone who's struggling to find a house they can afford to live in, someone who's working in wildlife conservation, or someone who's working in the oil and gas industry and worried about the jobs for their children's generation. We need to understand each other's perspectives on these things in order to understand how the changes that need to be made are going to impact differently on all of us. And if we want this to be a change, a transition that's fair, we need to understand that we're not all affected in the same way. So it's about understanding the issue, but it's also about understanding each other.
Thank you very much. And I've got two other children, who have questions for you. And I'm going to ask, first Andrew and then Tyler, and we're going to see how to respond. I want to make sure we answer to them. So Andrew, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm here as one of the members of Scotland's Climate Assembly. My question to you as ministers and as the ambassador is, how do you engage with local or national participation processes, and how do you incorporate their recommendations and their views into your work here at COP26 and also your work towards climate change more generally? Thank you.
That's great. So you got that. And then how about you, Tyler?
Hi, I'm Tyler, and I'm 12 and I'm from West Lothian, Scotland. And as Nadia said, we are some of the youngest children to actually participate in a climate citizens assembly, and we're both members of Children's Parliament. So that's letting us share our voices and our ideas and opinions about how to help tackle climate change. So my question to the ministers and the ambassador is that how are you listening and acting upon children's ideas?
That's a very good question. So you can at least pick one of them to answer. And if you have answers to the two, let's go ahead. So I will start with you, Patrick. What do you think?
Okay, well, I mean, at a local level, one of the things that we've done is, I mentioned it in my opening remarks, called participatory budgeting, which sounds like a very jargony phrase. It just means giving local communities the ability to make some choices about what's going to be spent in their area, how services might change. I was just talking earlier today at Glasgow City Council with colleagues from Northern Ireland and Glasgow about active travel, for example. We're going to be spending a lot of money on making it easier for people to walk and cycle around Glasgow. That's going to be a really big change. And there will be people who don't like some of that. There'll be people who think, I want to park my car. I want it to be easy for me to drive rather than for people on bikes to be getting in my way. Some of this becomes really, really controversial. If you engage people at a local level, if you give people the ability to think, we're going to decide this for ourselves, it's not being done to us, it's being done with us, then I think you can avoid some of that polarized debate and make local decisions that work really well. And I would connect it to the last question as well about children's voices, because a lot of countries that have been really successful at that change, about making public spaces safer and easier to walk, wheel and cycle, they've done it by saying children's right to play in public spaces is the most important thing. And if you start with that, children's right to use public spaces safely, then you inevitably, you don't just get the right decisions made about how those spaces are designed, you make sure that parents get it. They understand this is about my children's health, it's not just about where I park my car. So there's real opportunities at local level to make sure that children's voices are really making an impact.
Yes, thank you. And it's about being just not a politician, but about being, a human
Absolutely.
parent, to bring that back to the fore. How is it in Lithuania?
Yeah, I think in Lithuania, it is children and youth who are the main motivators to really look at the climate issue seriously. I mean, the number of people participating in the streets, in the protests, are mainly youth, school children who are really striving to attract it into political agenda, and they are succeeding more and more. So this is a very important role, really, to fuel energy for right decisions in the political agenda. So we are listening, and the media is listening and transforming that. And on a more practical level in Lithuania, what we do, so every year we also do climate hackathons. So this is like a competition of ideas on perspective climate solutions, be it something with data and IT, or something with clean energy, and businesses are really into sourcing these ideas from students, from school children, to find innovative solutions, thinking out of the box that sometimes from spending your days in the office, you really lack that creativity. So that is also.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Well, I think there's no point to have this kind of samples, citizens samples or children's and youth samples, if you don't then use or listen to ideas what they have and then try to put them in reality. So if we are having, and like we are having, and you are having here this kind of structure, you really need to use it, because if you don't do it, then they are useless, and the people get just tired of that, and why they are spending their time if nothing happens. So I think it's very important to understand that when you have and build this kind of samples, is you really need to then make those processes all the way and make sure that you can do the things that where it comes up. Even though, of course, there's maybe you can't do all the things and take them through all the way, but you really need to listen and then make sure that those things you are putting them forward. And then, well, in Finland we have had a youth delegate in COPs for 10 years, and it's very important also in this kind of international meetings to have this youth with you and listen to them, and also the capacity building is important. So it's not worth just taking young people with you if you don't also teach them how they can work here in the international context, and really teach them how this system works, so they can really be an active participation. So I think that's very important. And when we also have in Finland this kind of projects that the young people can have their own projects, like activities, and then they can ask money for them, and they have been very nice and like a concrete climate work, and those have been very successful for the climate and also for the biodiversity projects that the young people are doing together. They can plant them themselves, and then they can apply money for them, and then they are doing them for other young people and other children. And that's also important, because I think many young people want also be active and do things, not only talk, but to do things, and that's another aspect as well.
Thank you very much. Patricia, do you want to add?
Yes, well, first, perhaps to Andrew's question about how do we engage in consultations around what we're doing here. Certainly, the delegation that we bring is an important mechanism for having the voices of a diverse set of Canadians here with us. So we have a very strong participation of provincial and territorial governments on our delegation. We also have local governments represented. We have a strong youth delegation. We have 6 members who are on our official delegation, and a number of other youth groups that we're supporting in their leadership, because they're leading on a number of interesting things, like Student Energy is an organization which is doing very important youth-led work. And in fact, Minister Guilbeault is meeting with Indigenous youth right after this session. So there's a lot of engagement here at COP. And then Tyler, to your question of how are we listening to children's voices, you know, I had mentioned earlier the new youth council we're establishing for the Environment Ministry, but we've had an ongoing youth council for the Prime Minister of Canada, and that age group is actually a bit younger than the one we have for our ministry, which is intended to be more sort of policy discussions. The Prime Minister's Youth Council, the age range starts at 16. So that means that when we bring that youth council together, that involves ensuring that those 16-year-olds are traveling with a chaperone, and that we enable that kind of direct voice from youth. But I think the overall message is whenever we engage in consultations, we always have to be thinking about where's the youth voice. So, for example, in the consultation we had on our climate finance, which was an important piece of what we're talking about here at COP, we're pulling together roundtables on those. It's always to look at who's going to be in that conversation. We look at gender diversity, we look at diversity of backgrounds, minorities, and so on, but also where is the youth voice, and ensuring that there's a youth voice at the table.
Thank you very much. And we're coming to a close, actually. And it's interesting you mentioned, Patricia, the policy, the net zero policy. We're not going to be necessarily there in 2050. You're going to be, there. It's going to be so important for you to be brought in, in how we're going to make this happen, from the very inception. And I would like to really thank you to take the time. You're very busy, all of you, mobilized to try to leave Glasgow with something that resonates with you, that is meaningful, for you. And yes, let's continue to get this moving. And thank you very much. And a big applause to everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you.